We're going to spend some time now talking about a book that came out a couple of months ago, and you should be able to find it in your local bookstore. It is published by Moody Publishers, and it is entitled He Loved Them, Discovering Jesus' Heart for Seekers, Sinners, Doubters, and Discouraged, and Other People Like Us. About 170-plus pages, 17 chapters, great material that I think would be an encouragement to you. And I might even say for those of you that are teaching a small group or a Sunday school class, you may even want to work your way through some of these various chapters. But first of all, the author of this is Jessica Thompson. She is the author of several books, including Give Them Grace, Dazzling Your Kids with the Love of Christ. She's a conference speaker, has a podcast, which we have information about, and the director of church life at Risen Church in San Diego, California. So, Jessica, thank you for joining us today here on Point of View.
Thank you so much for having me. I am excited for our chat today.
Well, again, you cover a lot of different chapters in the book, but talking about Jesus with doubters and discouraged and deniers, people that are fearful and forgotten, and those in need. I just thought it was a great way that you had actually pulled all of that together. And for those of you watching online, I might hold up one of our most recent issues of the Outlook magazine, and you will see the cover says, again, loving the least of these. So in some respects, it fits very well with what we have been talking about here on Point of View. But most importantly, you really help us understand the different ways in which Jesus encountered people in the world around him, most of whom were forgotten or actually vilified or in some ways were actually outcast. And so you've done a very good job of kind of dividing each one of these really relevant stories in the Gospels to actually help us understand today how we should reach out to people in our own community.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, well, first of all, that everything you said, yes, and thank you. I appreciate your kind words about the book. And I spent some time just going through the Gospels and looking at the specific ways that Jesus interacted with different types of people. And like you said, there's 17 different chapters just going through all these different types of people. And my hope was that as you even looked at the table of contents or as you were reading through the book, you would see yourself in a bunch of these different chapters, but not just see yourself, like maybe you're in a time where you're fearful or you feel forgotten, or maybe you do feel like one of the least of these. But you would also see, and more importantly, see how Jesus always goes after those in the margins. Jesus always goes after those that society seems to forget, or maybe society turns away from, or society thinks, I don't want anything to do with them. Jesus is always going towards those people, which is so opposite, I think, from the way that we tend to live our lives, which is why there's such a calling on us as Christ followers, as those who want to walk the way as Jesus walked. There's such a calling on our lives to stop and look at how he's lived, to look at how he's loved, to look at how he's seen people. You know, a lot of times we think, if we can just say, I have empathy for those in the margins, if I just have empathy for those who maybe we consider the least of these. But what Jesus does is a step further than that. He doesn't just have empathy with. He comes down from heaven, considers equality with God not a thing to be grasped, and he becomes kin with the least of these. He says, I'm just like you. Matter of fact, he says, if you ignore the person who's in jail, you ignore the person who's hungry, you ignore the person who has needs, you're ignoring me. So he actually identifies with the marginalized. He doesn't just say, I'm going to help them. He says, I am them. And so for us now, as Christ followers, as Christians, for us, what we want to do then is to look at the least of these. And sometimes we feel like the least of these, and sometimes we look outside and we say, that's the least of these. In either one of those circumstances, what we need to know is that Jesus Christ has come to be our kin, to be our family, to take up also that least of these name. And he identifies with us so that we can then identify with him and love those around us.
And I might just mention, we talked about the book Uninvented, Why the Bible Could Not Be Made Up, because in some respects he was so counterculture, identifying with individuals that you would never, if you were a rabbi, go to. But the first couple of chapters deal with actually his apostles, Jesus with the doubters. I mean, part of that's, of course, the family, but the doubters, of course, Thomas. The discouraged, that'd be those on the road to Emmaus. Then deniers, well, of course, that gets to the Peter and some things of that nature. So really, we not only are talking about people that were on the margins, but some people that were actually close to Jesus. So that's why I think you've covered both of those. Not only people that are down and out, the homeless, those in jail, those who are at the edge of the deaths of despair that we talk about on this program, but some of us who actually believe that we are followers of Jesus and certainly are followers of Jesus, and we believe that we're closer to Jesus, but we still have some of those same doubts, discouragement, and even deny him sometimes in our situations.
Right. And you look at those three stories that you just talked about, doubters, discouraged, those on the road to Emmaus, and the deniers, and that's all stories that we just kind of went through when we're thinking about the resurrection, when we're thinking about Holy Week, the story of Jesus' crucifixion and resurrection. And yeah, I think a lot of times what we do is we think, oh, I'm a Christ follower, so that means that my life has to look like it's completely faith-filled. I can move a mountain if I want to. I have faith larger than a mustard seed. I will never deny him. We're kind of like Peter. I would never deny you, Lord. And yet, what Jesus says to Peter, it is so interesting to me. We're at the Last Supper. Jesus is talking to Peter, and he says to him, you're going to deny me 3 times. And, Peter's like, may it never be. I'll never do that to you, Lord. And the interesting thing about those verses to me is Jesus doesn't then say to Peter, you're about to deny me. Don't do it. He doesn't say that. What he says is, you're about to deny me. And when you have returned, strengthen your brothers, which is so wild. He could have said to him, don't do it, be aware, all those things. But what he says instead is, oh, Peter, I love you. I know what you're going to do. You're going to fall. And let me just tell you this. When you've returned, when you kind of return to your senses, I'm going to use this very weakness in your life to strengthen those around you. And for us, as Christ followers, as believers, that's so powerful, because what that says to us is he can use the very points in our lives that we think are our biggest failures. I mean, if you asked Peter, hey, what do you think one of your biggest failures was, I'm sure that would be on the top of the list, right? Denying Christ in his time of need, denying that you ever knew him. And yet, that's the very thing that Jesus uses to restore him into fellowship, restore him, asking him 3 times, also by a fire, do you love me? And finally, Peter's like, yeah, you know everything. You know I'm weak. You know I love you. You know how I've denied you. And so in that moment, Jesus restores Peter. And we use that story now. Like, I can look back at that story now, and it gives me so much encouragement, because the moments and the times in my life where I feel like I failed, I know that Jesus loves me enough and is powerful enough that he can use those to strengthen others.
I want to get your comments about Jesus with the failure. And you take us, of course, to Luke chapter 7. And if you're not familiar with that, again, the Pharisees invite Jesus in. And as a result, in the midst of this, you have an individual who is obviously down and out, seen as a failure, seen as a sinner, and yet nevertheless weeps, washes his feet with her tears, and even provides perfume. And at this point, you have Simon having a bit of a problem with all of this because he's a true Pharisee. And yet Jesus then turns to Simon and said, if you, again, want to understand this, suppose you have a creditor with 2 debtors, one who owed 500 denarii, another 50. Since he could not pay it back, he graciously forgave them both. But which did he love more? And he said, well, the one that forgave more. It seems to me that a very significant part of your book, Jessica, has to do with the reason that we really need to emulate Jesus, and that is to reach out to the people on the margins, the people that are brokenhearted, and certainly need a gracious touch that comes from those of us that can be the hands and feet of Jesus.
Yeah, absolutely. And so the whole reason I wrote the book was based in John 14, when Jesus is about to, he's ending his ministry. He's about to head to the cross. And the Bible says this: having loved his own, he loved them till the end. And so for us, like you said, as Christ followers, learning how to love others, but also learning how Christ has loved us in those moments where we are weak, in those moments when we are faint-hearted, in those moments where we are doubting. Christ isn't angry at us. His heart is actually compelled towards us. His heart moves towards those who are feeling less than. His heart is always one of moving towards those in pain, and one that wants to restore and renew and make them into a new creation. And so, it shows us how to emulate. But the reason that we can emulate is because he's renewed us. His love has renewed us. It's made us new. And so because we're new now, we can walk as he's walked.
Let me just mention, too, that you have one section that I thought was so helpful and maybe resonates because a lot of people have seen it on The Chosen, and that is Jesus with the outcast, because you remind us that we don't today have official laws that render people outcasts from society. But back in that day, if you were a Samaritan, you were an outcast, and you take us through an incredible story, which, again, a lot of people have seen in The Chosen or certainly read in the Scriptures. And once you understand the context of how Samaritans and just the whole area, Samaria itself, was to be avoided, and those people were to be avoided, and you would actually go out of your way not to go through that region, you can see that when Jesus talks about the Good Samaritan and uses that individual as a hero, or he talks to the Samaritan woman at the well, that was such an opportunity for us to understand the need for us to be countercultural.
Right. Again, like you said, his kingdom is so upside down. There was such deep-seated hatred between the Jewish people and the Samaritan people from Samaria that had gone back, thousands and thousands of years, deep-seated racism and hatred. And yet, this is where, like you said, Jesus chooses in this parable to make the Good Samaritan the hero. Jesus talks about with his interaction and that encounter with the woman at the well, the Samaritan woman, he goes out of his way to go through Samaria. Instead of going what everybody else would have done is go out of his way not to go. I think there's so often times in our lives where we can make a decision. Am I going to go through this area that maybe is going to expose me to things that make me uncomfortable, things I don't want to see, things I actually might even have biases against? Or am I going to go the opposite way? And what Jesus does is he doesn't just go through the area. He goes through the area and he revolutionizes. He changes relationships. His love for them, his love for this woman at the well triumphs over any sort of racism, any sort of and misogyny, right? Like in this culture, men and women, men didn't think of women as equal. That's not how the culture went. Men didn't think of women as people who could give to society. Women were often looked at as less than. Women were often put down. And yet, here's Jesus, who is not only talking to a woman at the well by himself, but a Samaritan woman. It's like insult upon insult. No one would have expected this. And yet, our Savior, our Jesus, goes exactly to the places we don't expect him. And what's so beautiful about that is then that means there's no place out of bounds for him. He will go, and he will love those people that we think surely not them. That's way out of my comfort zone. That's actually gross. I would never, and yet not him, not Jesus. Jesus goes to those people. He loves them. He touches them. He talks to them. He saves them. And that's a beautiful, beautiful truth that we should keep in mind as we interact with those around us.
Again, the book is entitled He Loved Them, Discovering Jesus' Heart for Seekers, Sinners, Doubters, and the Discouraged. And in the few minutes we have left, Jessica, talk about how people could use this book, because I suspect that you probably have taught this. And as I mentioned, even before you came on the air, I would think people would enjoy reading through this. It's a delightful book and enjoyable to certainly dig deeper into some of these stories and get the background, but also know that we have listeners that are maybe Sunday school teachers or small group leaders, maybe even pastors that maybe would want to take some of this and teach it. So talk about how you've already been able to use that and how maybe we could use this book in our own ministry.
Yeah, I definitely did a teaching series on this where I just went through and basically you just walking people through the Gospels in a different way. So you can definitely use this in small groups. You could use this just picking through the chapters and seeing which one you think would be applicable to those around you. And asking questions. How can we also emulate Christ? How does his love to this specific group of people change me, and how, change me so that I feel closer to him and know more of his love? And then how also does it change me so that I can then go out into the world, into my city, and love my city to life? So I think it's both, right? As what he's done changes us, then we're able to go out and change and love our cities. And so, yeah, I think you could easily go through these chapters. Like you said, they're short, they're accessible. I tried to make them in very plain language, try to take very deep truths and make them very readable and easy to understand. So it could really be something for a new believer all the way to someone who's read the Gospels a million times and just never looked at the stories in these ways. I mean, I'm biased. Obviously, I wrote it, but I really think that the teaching material would be great to take groups through.
Let's, if we say maybe how people can contact you because they may want to have you come and speak or maybe do something that is associated with that. What's the best way to contact you?
So I'm on the socials, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and my handle, how you find me is always the same. And I just got to say, it's because my name, Jessica Thompson, is right up there with one of the most common names in the entire United States. So how you can find me is the Jess Lou, or my website is jessicathompson.co.
Right. And again, we have some of that on the visual there as well, so people can find you on Twitter and a number of other places. So, Jessica, thank you for writing the book, and thank you for giving us some time today here on Point of View to talk about how Jesus loved others and how we need to emulate that as well. So thank you for being with us today here on Point of View.
I'm so grateful for the time we've had together.
Well, that's all we have for today. We hope you appreciated our conversation today. For more information on what we talked about, check out the links in the description of this episode or go to our website, pointofview.net. If you like this episode, follow us, tell a friend, and rate us so that we can continue bringing you the best highlights from Point of View. We'll see you next time right here on Point of View Highlights.